Just intro from myself. My name is Renata. I'm a head of business development within Apptica. I would review today how to increase the number of users through not organic channels, but through paid user acquisition. So today we're gonna review the data that we gathered within Apptica among 35 countries, 25 ad networks, and over 50,000 of advertisers. So we would review very important topics that probably very big numbers of user acquisition managers face. So we will see how review the growing cost of mobile advertising, just the overall global growth of the applications, and how to expand your apps into the different markets, and overall how to increase the number of downloads with users in mind. So first, I want to speak about a bit about the latest study of eMarketer. So here we can see on this graph that based on that study, the number of in-game advertising grew by 16% since the last year. And no wonder why the mobile apps getting more and more popular due to the very fast-paced living. Therefore, the number of the advertisers also increasing. So we can see here that the number of advertisers also increased by 19%. And also, of course, for that reason, the traffic getting more costly, the competition is pretty high, and therefore user acquisition managers, the creative managers should be as effective as they could be. They should know what competitors doing in order to adjust their strategies. So, of course, there's no magic pill or no magical user acquisition campaign, but there are obviously some very important factors, and we would review the top 3 of them. So first, once you structure your user acquisition campaign, you would definitely need to think about first the ad networks through which you're going to advertise. So you need to choose the right channels. And then, of course, you would need to find your core audience to whom actually your game or your application is going to be interested. And then the next step is, of course, is to make very very unique creatives, the ones that your audience gonna like, the ones that would gonna have the high click-through rates. So there's the top 3 main parts which we're gonna review today. And then, so first, just as I mentioned, we would need to speak of the networks. And of course, you can go and study the market. So it's, of course, depends on whether you have the gaming application or non-gaming applications. And here on this graph, you can see that based on the third quarter data that we have within Apptica, you can see that, for example, 72% of the non-gaming apps advertising through the ad mob, while if we're looking into the situation, let's say within AppFollow, it has 83% of the gaming apps. So once you structure your user acquisitions, depends on the game or app you have, this is the types of data that's going to be helpful to you once you structure it. And then also, not only you need to distinguish gaming and non-gaming apps. Obviously, different types of games advertise and structure their user acquisition differently. Whether you have the hyper casual or the mid-core game, it's obviously your strategy is going to be somewhat different. And here you can see, based on the type of genres, you can see that arcade most of the time choosing AppFollow, while Facebook represented pretty highly across all of the types of gaming. And then we have the Unity for the simulation, a bit of the chart boost for the puzzle. So this is also the part that you would need to keep in mind while you go through structuring your UA. And then, of course, the creative part. So it's of course all depends with what types of creatives you're going to start off. You might start off with all of the formats, but you will definitely need to keep in mind what are the formats that's going to work for your application the most. And then you can see that, for example, for the ad mob, 44%, so almost half, been taken by banners, while of course when it comes down to the social media such as Facebook and Instagram, video taken pretty high percentage. If we're looking into AppLovin, that has lots of the gaming apps advertising through that channel, we would see that they also have a significant percentage of the interactive ads, which is becoming pretty popular lately, especially for different different genres that's easy to represent. And just as we can see on this graph, most of the time playable ads chosen by arcade and puzzle, and of course it is because it's easy to show the gameplay for those types of genres through the playable ads. However, the video is still stays the most popular format. It's taking 56% of the overall number of creatives, and then of course the second one is the banners. And of course, besides the creatives, besides making it the video or the banner or the playable ad, you need to always think about your audience. So you need to think about how to personalize your ads through the based on demographics, interests, behaviors of your users. You definitely need to think about how you can make sure that you would send the right call to action messages to the right users. So let's review two cases of publisher King and Gem City. So we can see that if we're looking into the data on the iOS for King, we can see that most of their downloads and revenue dedicated within the United States. So when it comes down to the revenue, most of it within the United States, along with the downloads. And no wonder why. Most of us know that most paying users located within Western countries and the United States have the most expensive traffic, but it does pay off. So just like as we can see on this graph, United States has most of the revenue for King. And then as we're looking into the Gem City, the situation looks pretty alike, just like for the King. So here's also the iOS data for the revenue and downloads. And we can see here that United States and United Kingdom taking the first two spots for both. And just like for King, they're probably targeting their user acquisition based on the revenue that they're getting in those countries. However, if we're looking into the situation within Android, it's going to be a bit different. And I believe the main reason for that, because the Android users mostly have most of their share within the tier 2 and tier 3 countries, while if we're looking back to the iOS, the biggest percentage within the United States have the iOS devices. So here we can see that when it comes down to the data for revenue, it's also still United States for King. However, the situation looks different within the number of the downloads. We can see that here's on the first spot, the Brazil, India, Indonesia, and then Mexico, and United States only on the 5th spot. So you can see how the situation kind of switch here when we're looking into the Android devices. And then the Gem City, there's also Brazil on the first spot by the number of the downloads, as we can see. And then if we're looking into the number of the revenue, United States still on the first spot. So things that you would need to keep in mind once you're structuring your user acquisition, once you're choosing what types of countries you need to target, is of course how you monetize your applications. If you do it through ads, you would need to choose a bit of the different types of countries that you're targeting, whether you do it through in-app purchases. So, and of course, it's not one or another. It's always the mix of it. However, if we're talking about, let's say, about the hyper casual, most of their revenue comes through ads. And once, let's say, if you have the hyper casual application, you would also need to think about this part. And then, of course, even though you go with the easy route and you target the Western country first, you will always, there's going to be, you're reaching the point where you need to target the different markets, such as Asian market, Latin America. Just like every publisher, you would need to start thinking about the global growth of your application. And of course, the strategies that you need to follow, it's a bit different. You cannot choose exactly the same ad creatives you have within the United States and apply them for, let's say, China. So you would definitely need to keep that in mind. Once you started off with the Chinese market, you would need to see what creatives the local publisher using within Chinese market. So this is all of the questions that user acquisition and creative manager would need to ask themselves and figure out before you actually would go through the endless cycles of A/B testing, spend lots of the money on the user acquisition, and then realize that maybe something doesn't work the way you want it. So just like as we can see on this example, here's the types of creators that are highly shown within Asian market. There's lots of anime, and you would definitely need to think about it. And you might think that, oh, I don't have that type of, I don't know, images within my own game, but as we can see on the next example, here's the Live AF. It's a Chinese application, and you can see that this is the types of creatives below that they're using for promotion of their app within Chinese market. However, of course, they understand that within United States, that type of creative wouldn't work that well. And therefore, on the top example, we can see that it's exactly the same, exactly different representation of as the same app. So we can see how they're different, and it's at the first sight, it's even hard to believe that it's exactly the same application. And then, of course, making new creatives can be pretty pricey. Therefore, if you just starting off with the different markets, if you're just starting off running your ads within, let's say, China, and you're not really looking forward to spend lots of money on different types of banners, different types of videos, at least make the call to action button localized to the countries where you're planning to advertise. So this is not that big of a change, but it would definitely at least send the right message to your users, and you would definitely need to see and you would understand that they're targeting, and if they click on the localized button, they would go exactly to the stores versus just a second guess where to click. And then now we're going to review the video example on how the actually creatives can be different. So here it is.
哎，小姐姐，你在这玩啥呢？
明日之后啊，最近很火的。
你在这玩啥呢？
明日之后啊，最近很火的。一个生存游戏，没什么固定的玩法。一个生存游戏，没什么固定的玩法，就是好好活下去就可以了。
And then just as we saw, it's exactly the same app. First, Ad Creative was dedicated to Chinese market, and you can see how highly they focus on the social aspect of the game. You can see that they get the streaming of the game and how the user playing it actually, versus if we're looking into the Western example and the Ad Creative from United States, we can see how they focus on the personal experience. There's nothing about streaming the game. So you can definitely see how it's different from the market to market. And then last but definitely not least, we're gonna increase. We're gonna see how the overall increase of the traffic you buy leads to amount of the downloads you get. And we're gonna review the application by Voodoo Aquapark.io that was pretty viral past summer. So you can see here on the graph the number of the downloads that was pretty high within July of this year, and we can see the dynamics of it over time. And if we look into the graph of their user acquisition, we would also see the pretty high increase of their user acquisition and the traffic they bought. So there's definitely the correlation between the number of the downloads you get and the number and how highly you promote your apps through ads. Of course, you would definitely, the Voodoo guys, they do a pretty good job with their creatives and structuring their user acquisition. However, it's never hurt to, let's say, see how they're doing it and apply their strategies. And just like you can see on those two graphs simultaneously, I wouldn't say the number of the traffic you buy leads directly, but it's pretty high, correlates together. And as long as you make the pretty good creatives, you would be able to see how the number of the downloads of your applications growing. And I hope with the right creatives, the user acquisition for your own applications is going to be effective ones. So this is about it on my side. I reviewed how to increase and how to structure your user acquisition most effectively while you're doing the paid user acquisition through ads. Now, if you guys have any questions, would be happy to discuss them.
Yeah, I know it was a tough day for you as we were traveling and late with your flight. So thank you for joining us. Anyway, we have some questions. So people are asking about the pricing. So I hope you will follow up with them later. Yeah, so with the algorithm based on channels, what you give more weight to creative than to targeting? That's the question from Alex.
So if I understood the question right, so we looking into the different paths. So we're looking into not only the countries, but we're also looking into like the creative structure itself. So the creative, if we're looking into the data by let's say one creative of particular advertiser, we review the data on the geos where it was advertised, also into what types of specific applications it was advertised. So basically overall data of the creatives and how it could help out when you structure your UA.
Okay, thank you. Natalie, do you see any other questions?
Next question.
Okay.
On Facebook.
So in terms of the trying, it's a tough one because I'm not user acquisition manager myself. In terms of the play bullets on Facebook, I'm not sure whether they pretty viral now. I definitely know that they're pretty actively used within different in-app networks. However, as far as I know, within Facebook feed, they're not as active yet.
What about Google Ads? So some people are asking on the chat, would you recommend spending on them for social games or any games in general?
I would probably wouldn't put that, I don't know, on my shoulders and recommend you directly spend, let's say, on Google Ads or let's say Facebook. But I would definitely recommend you to review what the most successful competitors doing, because if they're that successful, they definitely know better how to structure their user acquisition. So you definitely need to see how they do that. And that, please keep in mind that this is the part that doesn't stay static. So it's always changes over time, market switching. Let's say at some point it would be more efficient for you to advertise within Google Ads, but then I don't know, at some period of time it would be more efficient through Facebook. So you would definitely need to stay up always on top of that data.
Okay, and one last question, maybe, because I do not see anything else on the chat right now. So coming from me, as everyone is planning their budgets for 2020 right now, what would be your recommendation? So one must thing to have on it for advertising.
I would love to say that you just need to jump right in, write me the email, and I would tell you more about Apptica. But my suggestion is you would definitely, optimization of the budgets is always great. It is great not only for the smaller companies, it's great for the bigger companies as well. So especially when we're talking about the higher cost of the user acquisition on the very hot seasons. So definitely you would need to see how you can optimize it, because if you spend thousands of dollars, which is most of the time the case when you wish to get your application high in the top charts, even the 2 to 5% can save you a lot. So optimize your creatives and just optimize your strategies overall. Don't keep it exactly the same all the time. So you would definitely need to change it rapidly, just as rapidly as market's changing.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Renata. Thank you so much, guys, and Natalie, for co-hosting with me today.